public relations has probably changed, evolved as well over the years. And I get the question a lot, what is the difference between PR and advertising? And one of the things I start with is that public relations does focus on earned media like news coverage. It's not as much about paid media, but in today's world, those two things complement each other more than they don't. In other words, we have clients that run the gamut. We're in industries from aviation to healthcare to consumer tech to public affairs. And more times than not, our agency works with our clients on a number of different levels. Earned media is definitely one of those things. Working with the news media, working with reporters and news outlets, whether they're traditional news outlets or digital news outlets, which are, growing obviously exponentially at this point. But we also work with them on a number of other platforms. Social media drives most conversations. I myself get most of my information from social media. Whatever your platform of choice is, they're all doing it. I don't necessarily get my news from TikTok, but my 13-year-old daughter does. I'm more of a Twitter or an X person. I'm on Facebook. All of these platforms deliver information. I think sometimes we get bogged down with news as the buzzword, but it's really just information. How are you taking in information? Where are the sources you are going to get that information? And as an organization who's trying to communicate with different audiences, you need to understand where those audiences are going to get their information and what sources they trust to get that information so that you can communicate effectively with that audience. While you can't anticipate every situation you might find yourself in, it is our philosophy that you can anticipate 90 to 95% of the things that might come your way based on your organization, based on past history, based on the monitoring of knowing what the public understands about you and your organization. What is your business? What are you involved in? And then you can understand what might be things that would fall under the crisis umbrella. Once you have those understandings, let's just use the airline industry for an example. Obviously, the most catastrophic thing that could happen to an airline industry is a plane crash. So you put that at the top of the list, right? But there are many, many other crisis situations that happen that do not involve physical danger. Think back just a couple of years ago, the travel fiasco during the holidays with a number of airlines. Southwest was probably the biggest. Its entire system went out. It couldn't know what its own schedules were. Everybody was grounded, and almost an entire ground stop in many parts of the country that left hundreds of thousands of people stranded at airports during the worst time that you could possibly have it. Is that life or death? Not as much as you would think an air disaster would be, but it was still nonetheless a massive crisis and what would be considered a massive failure by its customers. So that would be yet another example of something you would put on your crisis list. And then you drill for those things. You practice those things. You understand, okay, this is what happened. Now, what are the steps we are taking to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed? Who's speaking in front of the camera? That is just one aspect, one decision that has to be made out of probably 1,000 that your organization, depending on its size, if you're a big company or organization like an airline, maybe there's thousands of questions that have to be answered in a crisis communication plan. If you're a small local organization, I don't know, maybe there's just 10. But no matter how many of those questions need to be answered, how big or small, you should have answers to those questions, or at least a knowledge of those questions, so that when a crisis actually hits, that you are operating at top speed. You are not looking at each other with blank stares. You are not asking more questions than need to be in an actual crisis situation.